So what if I told you that the exact same artificial intelligence that's, supposedly coming to take your highly paid white-collar job
Right.
might actually be the exact same thing that ends up making you richer?
I mean, it sounds completely nuts, doesn't it? It's so counterintuitive
It really is.
because we have this deeply ingrained assumption, like this core belief that job displacement automatically equals financial ruin. But when you actually dig into the macroeconomic modeling of this current tech wave, well, that assumption gets turned completely upside down.
And that paradox is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to just cut straight through the noise. We want to get past the utopian tech bro dreams of this labor-free paradise where we all just paint watercolors all day.
Yeah, and we also want to avoid the dystopian sci-fi fears of, like, mass grinding unemployment.
Exactly. We are going to figure out what this revolution actually means for the structure of our wealth, the reality of our daily work, and, well, really the fabric of our society.
And to do that, we are synthesizing a massive stack of research today. We're looking at a really revealing working paper from the International Monetary Fund.
Right, the IMF one.
Yeah, the one pulling in massive macroeconomic data on capital and labor. Plus, we've got sociological frameworks from the journal Frontiers, some psychological studies tracking cognitive workers in the Indian IT sector, and this is the wild part, some really provocative theoretical work on what a post-work economy actually looks like in practice.
So if you are listening to this right now, whether you are, say, a senior executive prepping for a boardroom strategy meeting on how to integrate these tools.
Or maybe a mid-level manager trying to calculate your own career trajectory over the next 5 years.
Exactly. Or even if you're just insanely curious about the future of human labor, this deep dive is tailored to be your ultimate shortcut to being well-informed.
Because there's a lot to cover.
There is. And I want to jump straight back into that hook, that paradox we mentioned.
Let's do it.
Because we know AI is targeting the non-routine cognitive workers, right?
Yep.
The coders, the lawyers, the financial analysts, the writers.
Yeah, the knowledge workers.
Right. And yet, the data suggests these specific people might walk away with more wealth. How is that physically possible?
Okay, so to understand the mechanics of this, we have to pull back and look at a massive structural transformation. Economists call it the Great Decoupling.
The great decoupling.
Yeah. And this isn't something that just started with the release of the latest chatbot. This has been building for decades. We are talking about the macroeconomic shift between the value of labor and the value of capital.
Okay, let's break that down for a second, just so we're all on the same page. When we say capital versus labor, we're basically talking about how people make their money, right?
Essentially, yes.
So labor is the money you make from trading your time and effort, like your paycheck.
Right.
And capital is the money you make from owning things. Stocks, property, server farms, algorithms, firm equity.
That is the crucial distinction. And the trend line here is just staggering. If you look at the broad macroeconomic research, back in 1980, the global capital share of income was roughly 39%.
Going 39%.
But today, in 2024, it has risen to 46.2%.
Wow.
Yeah. The pie is growing, but the slice of the pie that goes to people simply for owning things is getting much, much larger.
Well, the slice that goes to people for actually working is shrinking.
Exactly.
And artificial intelligence is essentially pouring rocket fuel on that trend.
It is accelerating it at an unprecedented rate. I mean, the World Economic Forum recently projected that 92 million roles could be displaced globally by 2030.
92 million.
Yeah. And in the U.S. alone, there are estimates suggesting that up to 30% of current work hours could be automated within that exact same time frame.
30% of all work hours. That's just a staggering amount of human effort just evaporating from the wage market.
It's massive.
But this brings us to the IMF working paper you mentioned earlier, because they modeled this out and they found a dynamic that seems to contradict, well, basically everything we know about automation and inequality.
They really did. They modeled the economic impact of aggressive AI adoption, and their findings are fascinating. They found that AI could actually reduce wage inequality.
Reducing.
Yes, but at the exact same time, drastically increase wealth inequality.
Okay, I'm going to need you to pause and explain that mechanism. because on the surface, that sounds like a total contradiction.
Eh.
How does wage inequality go down if millions of people are losing their work hours?
Right, it sounds backwards. But we have to look at the history of automation to see why this time is so different. Think back to the factory robots of the 1980s.
Okay, like the big mechanical arms building cars.
Exactly. When those robotic arms hit the assembly lines, they primarily replaced routine manual tasks. And the people doing those tasks were typically lower-income workers.
Right.
So automation pushed lower-income wages down, while the factory owners and the white-collar managers saw their incomes rise.
Which blew the wage inequality gap wide open.
Precisely. The distance between the lowest earner and the highest earner grew.
The classic narrative. Blue-collar work gets automated, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. But AI inverts that target.
It entirely inverts it. Generative AI is uniquely capable of performing non-routine cognitive tasks.
Like drafting legal contracts.
Right, drafting contracts, debugging complex software code, generating marketing strategies, analyzing financial models. The human workers who currently perform those tasks are not on the factory floor.
No, they're sitting in the upper deciles of the income distribution. They're the high earners.
Exactly. So if you think about it, because the highly paid cognitive workers are the ones suddenly facing intense downward pressure on their wages from an algorithm.
An algorithm that can do their job in 3 seconds.
Right. Because of that, the gap between the highest wage earners and the lowest wage earners actually shrinks.
Ah, I see. So the lawyer's wage drops, the janitor's wage stays the same, so wage inequality technically decreases.
That is the exact mechanism. The IMF model predicts a decrease in the Gini coefficient for wage inequality.
Let's do a quick definition check there for anyone who hasn't taken an econ class recently.
Good idea.
The Gini coefficient is basically a mathematical score for inequality, right?
Yes.
Where 0 means perfect equality, like everyone has the exact same amount, and 1 means total inequality, where a single person holds absolutely everything.
Correct. It's the standard metric for measuring how concentrated money is in a society. And the IMF model shows the Gini coefficient for wages dropping by 1.73 percentage points.
Which sounds like a victory for equality, honestly.
It does. But then you look at the second half of their finding. You cannot just look at wages. You have to look at total wealth.
Right, the capital versus labor thing again.
Exactly. And the wealth Gini coefficient, the measure of who actually owns the assets, is predicted to rise by a staggering 7.18 percentage points.
Holy cow. Which brings us full circle to the paradox. How do these highly educated, high-earning professionals lose their premium wages but end up with more total wealth?
Because of the structure of their personal portfolios.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, workers in the upper income brackets have the lowest share of their total income coming strictly from a biweekly paycheck.
Right, they have investments.
They possess the largest wealth holdings. But crucially, it's not just money sitting in a basic savings account. The largest share of their wealth is tied up in risky but high-return assets.
Like firm equity, broad market index funds, 401ks, stock options.
Exactly. So think about what happens when a major firm adopts AI. They suddenly save massive amounts of money by automating thousands of hours of high-wage cognitive tasks.
They don't have to pay those fat salaries anymore.
Nope. And those massive cost savings immediately translate into skyrocketing corporate profits.
What happens when corporate profits skyrocket? The value of the firm's equity goes through the roof.
That's it. So if you are a senior partner at a law firm, or a mid-level manager at a tech giant with a robust stock package.
The AI might absolutely decimate the billable hours of your junior staff.
Right.
And it might even devalue the specific administrative tasks you do every day. But your stock portfolio, your equity in the firm, balloons in value.
Exactly. The AI-driven rise in capital returns disproportionately benefits the very people whose daily tasks are being automated.
That is the great decoupling in action right there.
Yeah.
You are basically transitioning from a worker who does tasks to an owner who directs systems.
Beautifully put. And the IMF paper highlights a second crucial factor at play here, complementarity.
Complementarity.
Yeah. Not all workers are purely substituted by AI. High earners, particularly those in strategic roles, are highly complementary to these models.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to see if I'm getting this. I think about the invention of the digital spreadsheet in the late 1970s.
Oh, that's a classic example.
Right. When VisiCalc and Microsoft Excel hit the market, there was this massive panic that the accounting profession was just going to be wiped off the map.
Total panic.
But it didn't eliminate accountants. It eliminated the clerks who manually tallied columns of numbers, like the math doers.
Yeah.
But it incredibly enriched the financial strategists.
Right.
The accountants who survived and thrived were the ones who used the spreadsheet to run 10 different financial scenarios in the time it used to take to run one. They became complementary to the technology. Is that what we're looking at with AI?
It's a very strong historical parallel. The research notes that AI can augment high-wage cognitive tasks just as easily as it can replace them.
So if you are a senior architect,
And an AI can instantly generate the structural load calculations that used to take a team of juniors a week to do. Your personal productivity as the architect just skyrocketed.
wow. So even if the market value of the specific calculation task drops to near zero, your overall output as a strategic director increases exponentially.
Exactly. You offset your wage stagnation with massive efficiency gains.
I'm going to push back on that a bit, though,
Go for it.
because that spreadsheet analogy relies on a very specific classical economic theory, right? The compensation principle.
Yes, the compensation principle.
The idea that new technology might destroy specific jobs, but it always lowers the cost of goods, which spurs new demand, which creates new, better jobs.
That's the textbook theory.
But a spreadsheet still requires a human to do the strategic thinking. If we are looking at artificial intelligence that is actively scaling toward human-level reasoning across the board, what actually are the new jobs?
That is the big question.
Right, because if the AI can eventually do the financial strategy as well as the math, doesn't the compensation principle just break down entirely?
And you have just articulated the central existential fear of macroeconomic forecasters right now. As the theoretical models in our sources point out, if we reach a state of general intelligent action where the machine isn't just a calculator but a reasoning engine, the historical rules might not apply. If AI can reason, strategize, and execute, the overall demand for human cognitive labor might permanently contract, regardless of how cheap products become.
Wow. So if you're listening to this, the immediate takeaway is that the entire structure of wealth is shifting beneath our feet. The safety of the traditional white-collar office job is essentially a legacy concept now.
It really is. Which means we need to stop talking about broad economic trends and look closely at the actual individuals caught in this transition.
Because if two people have the exact same job title and face the exact same automation, who actually survives the transition?
Exactly. To answer that, we have to move from the macro level to the micro level. The Brookings Institution has done some incredibly vital work here by introducing a metric they call adaptive capacity.
Adaptive capacity. Okay, tell me about that.
They argue that looking simply at a job's exposure to AI is misleading.
Because exposure just means the machine can physically do the task.
Right. What actually matters is a worker's personal capacity to navigate the disruption when their task is automated.
So it's not about the job, it's about the safety net of the person holding the job.
Exactly. The Brookings data analyzed the U.S. workforce and identified 37.1 million highly AI-exposed workers.
37 million, that's huge.
The headline could easily be 37 million jobs at risk, but when you apply the adaptive capacity metric, a much more nuanced picture emerges.
Okay.
Out of those 37 million people, roughly 70%, about 26.5 million workers, actually have high adaptive capacity.
Okay. 70% having high capacity sounds like a solid majority. That almost feels like good news, right?
Yeah.
What exactly gives someone high adaptive capacity?
It's a combination of financial, educational, and geographic factors. It means they have significant personal savings to weather, say, a 6-month period of unemployment while they retrain.
Which a lot of people don't have.
Right. It also means they hold a bachelor's degree or higher, giving them foundational skills that are transferable to other industries. And crucially, it means they live in dense, diverse, metropolitan labor markets where new jobs are constantly being created.
So the senior financial analyst living in Chicago with a robust 401k might lose their specific role to an AI, but they have the cushion and the local opportunity to pivot into a new strategic role.
Exactly.
But, I mean, I'm doing the math here. If 70% are safe, that leaves 30% who aren't.
Yes. There is a precarious core of 6.1 million workers who face high AI exposure but have low adaptive capacity.
And when you look at the demographic breakdown of this specific group, it is incredibly sobering.
Very sobering.
What does that demographic look like?
An alarming 86% of these 6.1 million vulnerable workers are women.
86%. That is a massive demographic skew. Why is it hitting women so disproportionately?
Because of occupational segregation. These workers are primarily concentrated in clerical and administrative roles.
Oh, I see.
We are talking about data entry, medical scheduling, basic bookkeeping, HR assistance, back office support. These are roles where the wages are relatively modest, meaning these workers haven't been able to build up the financial savings required for high adaptive capacity.
And the skill sets are highly specific to the exact kinds of text processing and scheduling tasks that generative AI models excel at.
Exactly.
And there's a geographic element to this vulnerability that I found totally fascinating in the research. These vulnerable clerical roles aren't just evenly sprinkled across the country.
No, they're highly concentrated in specific types of towns.
Where are they?
They are heavily clustered in college towns and state capitals, particularly in the Mountain West and the Midwest of the United States.
Think about that for a second. If you live in a town where the local economy is entirely anchored by a massive state university or a massive state government apparatus,
Right.
that institution employs legions of administrative staff.
Right.
If an enterprise AI system is deployed that instantly streamlines university admissions processing or automates state vehicle registration and tax document sorting.
That isn't just a few people losing their jobs.
No, that is a concentrated, localized economic shock that hits the entire community at once.
And this brings up a really vital distinction about how this disruption actually happens on the ground.
Well, yeah.
It's rarely a one-to-one replacement where a robot literally sits in a chair. A paper we reviewed introduces two concepts that clarify this perfectly: capability disruption versus responsibility disruption.
This was one of my absolute favorite frameworks in the entire stack of research.
Right.
Because capability disruption is exactly what it sounds like. It just means the machine has the capability to do the task.
Right.
The AI can draw the digital illustration. The AI can write the block of Python code.
Yes, but capability alone doesn't eliminate a job. What eliminates the job is responsibility disruption. This is about who is legally, institutionally, and socially accountable for the output.
Walk us through how that works in practice. Let's use a creative studio as an example.
Perfect. Imagine a mid-sized video game studio. Historically, you have an art director who manages a team of, say, 5 junior concept artists. The junior artists do the sketching, the drafting, the iteration. Now introduce generative AI. The capability disruption means the AI can generate those concept sketches instantly.
Which is amazing.
But the studio can't just publish AI art blindly. Someone has to be responsible for making sure it fits the game's vision, doesn't infringe on copyrights, meets quality standards.
Right. You still need a human on the hook if something goes terribly wrong.
Exactly. But here is the responsibility disruption. The institutional structure shifts. The studio no longer needs to assign responsibility to 5 different junior roles. They consolidate all of the legal, ethical, and artistic responsibility onto that single art director.
Ah, so the art director is now orchestrating the AI tools himself.
Yes, the 5 junior roles evaporate. Not just because the machine can draw, but because the institution no longer needs a human hierarchy to distribute responsibility.
So the entry-level jobs, the drafting, the storyboarding, the junior coding, the paralegal research, they just vanish.
They do.
The power and the responsibility consolidate upward to a single orchestrator. So if you are listening to this and trying to calculate your own adaptive capacity, this is the ultimate question you have to ask yourself.
Absolutely.
Does your role exist to execute a capability? Or does your role exist to hold institutional responsibility? Because capabilities are being automated. Responsibilities are being consolidated.
And for those who fall on the wrong side of that equation, the people whose capabilities are automated, the impact goes far beyond their bank account.
Yeah.
We tend to talk about job loss purely in terms of economic data points, right? Unemployment rates, severance packages. But losing your livelihood to an algorithm is a profound psychological trauma.
This is where the research gets deeply human. We looked at a very revealing psychological study focusing specifically on cognitive workers in the Indian IT sector.
Yes.
This is a demographic that is quite literally on the front lines of cognitive automation right now. And the researchers apply a psychological framework called the theory of shattered assumptions.
The theory of shattered assumptions was originally developed by psychologist Ronnie Janoff-Bullman to understand trauma. It posits that all of us operate with a set of core, often subconscious beliefs about the world.
Like what?
We believe the world is generally fair, that it is relatively safe, and that our actions have predictable outcomes.
And for the professional class, there is a very specific, almost unwritten psychological contract layered on top of those assumptions.
Very much so.
It's the promise that if you play by the rules, if you study hard, get a specialized degree, take on the student debt, and master a complex cognitive skill, you will be rewarded with stability, respect, and a middle-class life.
It is the foundational narrative of modern education. So imagine you are a top-performing software developer or a skilled data analyst. You have spent a decade mastering a programming language.
You've done everything right.
And then suddenly you are made redundant, not because you were lazy, not because you made a massive mistake, not even because the company is going bankrupt. You are laid off simply because an algorithmic model can now execute your highly complex cognitive capability in 3 seconds for fractions of a penny.
That isn't just an economic setback. That is an identity crisis.
It causes profound psychological disorientation. The Indian IT sector study highlights that these workers don't just feel unemployed, they feel actively betrayed by the system they trusted.
Wow.
Their fundamental assumption about how the world rewards effort has been completely shattered.
Let's ground this in an analogy because I think it helps clarify how deep this goes. Think about spending 10 years paying off a mortgage on a house.
Okay.
You scrimp, you save, you put all your equity into this one asset because society told you that is the safe, responsible thing to do.
Right.
And then you wake up one morning and the bank announces that they have completely changed the national currency. Your house is suddenly worth nothing in the new system.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's not just that you lost money. It's that your fundamental trust in the rules of reality has been pulled out from under you. You don't even know how to begin participating in the new system because the rules that governed your entire adult life were just erased.
That captures the paralysis perfectly. And this trauma is amplified by what sociologists are calling the loss of the graduate entry route.
The graduate entry route. We kind of touched on this earlier.
We did when we talked about how responsibility consolidation wipes out junior roles. If AI is doing the entry-level paralegal work or the junior coding or the basic copywriting, we're creating a missing middle in career progression.
Right. Because how does a young law student ever become a senior partner orchestrating the AI if they can never get a job as a junior associate to learn the foundational ropes of the legal system in the first place?
They can't. The scaffolding of social mobility is being systematically removed. And what the study of the Indian IT workers emphasizes is that modern corporate HR departments are failing miserably to handle this.
Are they just ignoring it?
They are treating these AI-driven layoffs as purely logistical spreadsheet exercises, just rebalancing the budget. They are providing absolutely no emotional scaffolding during these transitions.
Because the HR departments themselves probably don't know how to handle it, right? They're probably terrified for their own jobs.
Exactly. And the result is widespread grief, severe anxiety, and a lingering atmosphere of paranoia. Not just among those who are let go, but among the employees who remain.
Survivor's guilt, basically. Plus fear. Because the survivors are sitting at their desks looking around, thinking, I survived this round, but the model is getting smarter every day. I could be next.
Exactly. The psychological safety of the workplace is just gone.
Which forces a really difficult pivot. If seasoned, successful adults with established careers are experiencing this level of psychological whiplash, how on earth are we preparing the next generation?
That's the million-dollar question.
What are we doing to educate kids who are about to step into a labor market that is fundamentally shifting beneath their feet?
This brings us to what might be the most alarming data point in our entire stack of sources. We reviewed a fascinating international education study that analyzed the career planning of secondary students in the age of automation.
And what did it find?
It reveals a massive, almost tragic disconnect between technological reality and social aspiration.
Let's dig into the data out of Hong Kong, because the researchers specifically looked at elite, perfect score, international baccalaureate students.
Right, the highest achievers.
The kids who test perfectly, who have their pick of universities. You would assume these highly plugged-in students are reading the writing on the wall.
You would think so.
But they aren't. The data shows they are still overwhelmingly aspiring to traditionally prestigious, high-risk cognitive jobs. They all want to be corporate lawyers, investment bankers, and specialized doctors.
Almost none of them were aspiring to be AI developers or to work in the fields actively creating the technologies that will define their generation. They are caught in a classic prestige loop.
So social status is literally blinding them to technological reality.
Precisely. They are pursuing careers that guarantee social respect from their peers and parents today, completely ignoring the fact that the routine cognitive tasks that make up the bulk of those highly respected professions are the exact targets of frontier AI models.
Wow.
And the irony is incredibly bitter. The very tools that are threatening their future careers are currently degrading their fundamental skills in the classroom.
Okay, let's look at the classroom dynamic because it's so much deeper than the basic, kids are using Chat GPT to cheat on essays narrative. We all know that's happening.
Right, that's just the surface.
The real issue is what happens to the human brain when it relies on that tool.
Yeah.
There was a prominent study out of the University of Pennsylvania that looked at this.
The Penn study is a perfect example of the dual-edged sword of cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offload.
Yes. On one hand, using generative AI boosts short-term task completion. It feels like a massive productivity hack for a student.
Sure, they finished their homework in 10 minutes.
But the researchers found that when students used generative AI to assist with test preparation and practice problems, they actually scored lower on the final unassisted exams than students who didn't use the AI at all.
Because they outsourced the cognitive struggle.
Exactly. Learning requires friction. When you struggle with a complex math problem or wrestle with the structure of a persuasive essay, you are building physical neural pathways in your brain.
Right, you're building the muscles.
You are developing underlying problem-solving logic. When a student prompts an AI and gets the perfect answer in 2 seconds, they get the result, but they bypass the neurological process of learning how to reach that result. Their critical thinking skills atrophy.
So we have an entire generation currently outsourcing their cognitive development to an algorithm in order to get perfect grades to get into an elite university so they can graduate and apply for a prestigious cognitive job that the algorithm is already perfectly capable of doing.
It is a terrifying self-defeating cycle.
It's totally wild. But
Yeah.
we can't just blame the students for taking the path of least resistance, right?
No, we have to look at how the educational institutions themselves are adopting this technology. A prominent sociological paper introduces a very useful lens for this. The socio-technical ethical pedagogical framework, or the SNEP model.
The STEP model, right? I remember this.
Yeah.
It argues that we need to completely abandon the idea that AI is just a neutral tool.
Yes. For decades, we've treated new classroom tech as neutral. A calculator doesn't have an agenda, it just does math faster. But the STEP model argues that AI is a socio-technical actor.
Break down that jargon for me. What does it actually mean for a piece of software to be a socio-technical actor?
It means the technology isn't just sitting there waiting to be used. It actively reorganizes the power dynamics and the social relationships in the room.
Okay, give me a concrete example.
Imagine a school district implements an AI grading system to save teachers time and a predictive analytics dashboard to flag which students are statistically likely to drop out.
I mean, that sounds efficient on paper.
It does. But what actually happens? First, it normalizes intense surveillance. The student's every click, pause, and keystroke is suddenly data feeding a risk algorithm.
Big brother in the classroom.
Right. Second, it fundamentally shifts pedagogical authority. If the AI grades an essay a C based on its opaque proprietary rubric and the student challenges it, who does the teacher defend?
Oh, wow.
Do they defend their own professional judgment or the machine's algorithmic certainty? The authority shifts from human empathy to machine output. The teacher becomes an administrator of the algorithm rather than a mentor to the student.
And the student stops writing to express an idea and starts writing specifically to appease the machine's rubric.
Exactly.
So if we know all of this, if the data shows these tools degrade problem solving and shift authority away from human teachers, and if we know the prestige jobs these kids are aiming for are highly exposed to automation, why is society still rushing headlong into this? Are we just totally paralyzed by this prestige loop?
I think many institutions are paralyzed, yes, but we also have to step back and recognize our own bias here. Worrying about whether a perfect score IB student becomes a lawyer or a prompt engineer is a profoundly luxurious problem.
True.
It is a very global north perspective. If we want to truly understand how AI is going to restructure human society, we have to zoom out from the elite classroom and look at the macro global stage. Because what is happening at the geopolitical level is the birth of an entirely new form of digital colonialism.
This was the part of the research that honestly gave me a sense of vertigo, the sheer scale of the macroeconomic global divide. The research tracks this using what they call the AI Preparedness Index, or AIPI, and measures digital infrastructure, human capital, and regulatory frameworks. Advanced economies currently boast an average AIPI score of 0.68. Emerging markets are trailing at 0.46, and low-income countries sit at just 0.32. That isn't just a gap. That is a structural chasm that is expanding every single day.
And this chasm leads us to a concept that sociologists and political economists are increasingly referring to as digital feudalism or algorithmic stratification.
Digital feudalism, that's a heavy term.
To understand why they use it, look at the historical modes of economic extraction. In the agrarian age, power and wealth came from owning arable land.
Right.
The extraction method was demanding tithes and physical labor from the serfs who lived on your land. Then we moved to the industrial age. Power shifted to owning the factories and the machines.
And the extraction method was taking the surplus value from the wage labor of the factory workers.
Exactly. If you owned the printing press or the steel mill, you held all the cards. Now, step into the AI era. Where does the power reside?
It resides in owning massive compute clusters, server farms, and proprietary frontier data models.
And the new method of extraction isn't tithes or wage surplus, it is digital dues.
API fees, cloud subscription models, licensing costs.
Precisely. Because the entry barriers to build a frontier AI model from scratch are astronomically high. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars just in raw compute power and electricity, not to mention the specialized talent.
Yeah, you can't build that in your garage anymore.
Because of that cost, competition at the foundational level becomes purely aspirational for most of the world. The absolute power consolidates into the hands of a few megacorporations located almost exclusively in the global north.
The analogy that crystallized this for me is medieval castles.
Oh, I like that.
These massive tech giants, they own the castles. They spent $100 million building the fortress that is a frontier model. And the rest of the world, whether you are a small business in Ohio or an entire developing nation, you are simply a tenant farmer.
You're just paying rent.
Exactly. You pay rent to use the land. You pay your monthly API fees to process your own data on their servers using their models. You are structurally locked in as a consumer, never an owner.
And for the global south, the barrier to ever building their own castles is almost insurmountable under current conditions.
Because they lack the infrastructure.
The macroeconomic research lays out the human capital deficit in stark terms. For sub-Saharan Africa to simply catch up to the baseline infrastructure required to compete in the AI economy, they need an estimated $418 billion in broadband investment.
$418 billion.
Yes. Furthermore, they need an influx of 23 million new STEM graduates by 2030.
23 million.
Yes. And at their current graduation rates, it would take them 150 years to produce that specific workforce.
A century and a half. That means entire regions of the globe are structurally locked into being dependent consumers of foreign technology.
Permanently.
But it gets darker than just paying subscription fees. There is a deeply hidden supply chain behind this technology that we absolutely have to discuss, because these models aren't magic. They require human labor, what sociologists are calling the digital peasantry.
Yes. When we interact with the generative AI, the output feels pristine, logical, and safe, right?
Right.
But that safety filter is built on the backs of invisible human labor. To ensure an AI model doesn't output horrific violence or illegal content, it has to be trained on what that content looks like so it knows what to block.
Okay.
To do that, tech companies offshore the data labeling. Data annotators in countries like Kenya are sitting in rooms, staring at screens, and are paid roughly $1.32 to $2 an hour to review and tag the most traumatizing, vile content the internet has to offer.
Child abuse, graphic violence, hate speech.
Exactly. It is a grueling, psychologically devastating form of digital labor, and it exists purely to extract value from the global south in order to sanitize and perfect a commercial product that will be owned and sold by the global north.
It's the absolute dark underbelly of the AI boom. And it's not just economic extraction either. There's also a subtle but pervasive form of cultural erasure. We have to look at the epistemological bias of these systems.
The bias in the training data itself.
Exactly. These massive frontier models are trained on scraping datasets like Common Crawl, which is basically a snapshot of the entire internet.
Right.
But the internet is not a perfect representation of humanity. The Common Crawl data is overwhelmingly English, and it is heavily skewed toward the cultural norms, values, and legal frameworks of the global north, specifically the United States and Western Europe.
Which means the AI systems themselves inherently marginalize the cultural realities of developing nations.
Exactly. If you are a local government in Nigeria or a startup in Indonesia, and you were using a foundational AI model to help draft local policy or moderate a community forum, but that AI was trained almost entirely on U.S. case law and Silicon Valley social norms, how useful is it?
It's totally warped.
Right. How aggressively does it impose a uniform Western algorithmic lens onto your local culture?
It creates a homogenization of thought. It dictates what is considered professional, what is considered polite, and what is considered correct based purely on the dominant training data.
Now, I want to pause here and do a quick impartiality check for everyone listening.
Good call.
We are laying out the raw economic and structural reality of this global infrastructure race. There are massive, incredibly complex geopolitical tensions happening right now regarding this. You have the U.S. model, which is largely driven by proprietary corporate AI. You have China's model, which integrates state-directed efficiency and control.
And you have efforts emerging in the European Union, India, and the broader global south to build sovereign, open-source AI models to protect their local data.
Exactly. And we are not taking a side on this deep dive about which geopolitical strategy is right or morally superior. We are simply reporting the stark macroeconomic reality. Whoever controls the foundational compute and the models will control the economic future. And right now, that control is incredibly dangerously concentrated.
The risk is a state of permanent digital apartheid. The capital, the physical infrastructure, and the rulemaking authority are concentrated in a few elite hubs, while the rest of the world risks becoming permanently dependent on foreign digital platforms just to participate in the modern economy.
Okay, we need to take a breath and synthesize this. Because we have painted a genuinely grim picture over the last chunk of time.
It's a lot to take in.
We've got massive wealth concentration accelerating toward the capital class. We have profound psychological trauma and shattered assumptions among displaced cognitive professionals. We have an education system that is struggling to adapt and actively degrading critical thinking. And we have a global divide that looks increasingly like digital feudalism.
It's quite the list.
If human cognitive labor is systematically devalued by machines across the board, how do we reorganize society so it doesn't just collapse into a dystopian nightmare?
This is where we pivot from diagnosing the problem to exploring the solutions. And there is a fascinating theoretical framework being developed by economists and sociologists for what they call a post-work society.
Well, post-work society.
Yes. One of the most compelling concepts we reviewed is post-work organization, or PWO. This is discussed extensively in some of the broader sociological theory on post-neoliberalism, and it's echoed in insights regarding the shift from doing tasks to directing outcomes.
So a post-work organization. On its face, that sounds like an oxymoron. If there is no work, what is the organization doing?
It sounds paradoxical, but it's actually a very rigorous structural framework designed to manage the transition to a highly automated economy. It's built on a holistic vision, rather than just waiting for the market to sort it out.
So it's deliberate.
Yes, it requires a total reimagining of why we gather in corporations in the first place.
Walk me through how a PWO actually functions in practice.
It integrates several shifts simultaneously. First, technologically, a PWO has an explicit, unapologetic goal. Automate absolutely all routine and automatable work.
All of it.
All of it. You do not keep human beings doing busy work just to justify a 40-hour work week. You fully embrace the efficiency of the machine.
Okay, so total technological surrender to efficiency. If the AI can do it, the AI does it. But if the AI is doing everything, how do people survive economically?
That requires an economic shift alongside the technological one. In a true post-work model, society has to decouple income from individual-specific jobs.
Decouple income from jobs.
Yes. If the machines are doing the bulk of the routine production and administration, human labor becomes highly targeted, part-time, and largely voluntary. Your basic survival food, shelter, healthcare is no longer tethered to whether you can find a manager willing to pay you for 40 hours of cognitive labor a week.
Which implies some form of universal basic income or a massively expanded social safety net funded by the productivity of the AI. And we will absolutely dig into the nightmare of how to actually tax and fund that in a minute.
Right, that's the tricky part.
But from a sociological perspective, what do humans actually do in a PWO if they aren't forced to work for survival?
This is where it gets interesting. It involves the deliberate elimination of what the late anthropologist David Graeber famously called bullshit jobs.
Oh, yeah.
These are jobs that are essentially pointless, unnecessary, or even pernicious, but they exist purely to keep people employed in a bureaucracy. Middle managers managing other middle managers. In a PWO, human labor is focused strictly on socially useful, meaningful work. you eliminate empty labor. And politically, because the work is part-time and voluntary, the workplace itself shifts away from strict top-down corporate dictatorships toward a more democratic participatory self-governance.
I mean, it sounds incredibly utopian. But nestled inside this post-work theory is a concept that I found deeply practical, something called the moral frontier.
Yes, the moral frontier. As the value of routine cognitive doing drops to zero, human value rises exponentially in areas requiring complex judgment, lived ethics, and genuine empathy.
The research showed this in public polling, right?
Yeah.
Jobs that are rooted in fundamental human principle rather than just raw performance metrics. Roles like clergy members, trauma therapists, palliative care nurses, early childhood educators. These roles have incredibly low public support for automation. The data showed only a 12% support rate for automating those positions.
Exactly. The moral frontier represents the new human advantage. We don't want an AI priest giving last rites, even if it can recite the scripture perfectly. We don't want an AI therapist helping a couple through a divorce, even if the algorithm has perfectly memorized the entire DSM-5 psychological manual. We possess a deep, innate craving for human connection, shared vulnerability, and moral accountability in these spaces.
Therefore, these professions are shielded from automation. Not by technical limitations, because the AI can absolutely generate the dialogue, but by profound social preference.
Okay.
I love the idea of this. I really do. I love the idea of eliminating bureaucratic empty labors and allowing humanity to focus on the moral frontier of empathy and connection. But I have to play devil's advocate here, because practically, this raises massive red flags. First of all, if we rely on voluntary part-time work, who's actually going to do the hard, unglamorous, physically grueling jobs that robots can't quite do yet?
That's a valid point.
Who's cleaning the municipal sewers? Who's repairing the high-voltage power lines in a snowstorm? You can't run a global supply chain purely on volunteers.
Sure.
And secondly, doesn't relying on the moral frontier just create a brand new, highly exclusionary elite class?
How do you mean?
Well, if you aren't naturally a highly empathetic therapist or a charismatic, visionary leader, what if you were just a quiet, introverted person who is really, really good at back-end accounting?
Ah, I see.
If your capability is automated, are you just left behind to subsist on a basic income stipend while a new elite class of empaths and directors runs the entire society? Are we just replacing a meritocracy of intelligence with a meritocracy of charisma?
Those are the exact critiques leveled against the post-work vision. You are absolutely right. You cannot simply rely on goodwill and voluntary labor to maintain the complex, gritty physical infrastructure of a globalized world.
It just doesn't work.
And yes, if we elevate the orchestrators and the empaths to the very top of the social hierarchy, while relegating the displaced cognitive workers to a baseline universal income, we haven't eliminated inequality. We have just changed the criteria for who gets to be the elite.
Which means we can't just rely on sociological theories. We need concrete structural economic policies to manage this transition right now, today.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult piece of the puzzle: policy pathways and the agonizing trade-offs governments are facing. We reviewed a comprehensive roadmap from a major report on AI workforce policy alongside that crucial macroeconomic working paper we discussed at the start.
So how do governments actually manage a disruption that moves this fast? Because the standard political process, where a crisis hits, politicians argue about it for 2 years, pass a watered-down bill, and eventually send out a small check, that is too slow to handle algorithmic displacement.
It is entirely too slow. This is why the Workforce Policy Report strongly advocates for the implementation of automatic stabilizers.
Explain the mechanism of an automatic stabilizer. How does it physically work?
Think of it like a sprinkler system in a building. You don't wait for the fire department to arrive and debate whether to turn the water on. The system detects the heat and it triggers automatically.
Makes sense.
In economic terms, automatic stabilizers are social safety nets. Things like expanded unemployment insurance, direct wage subsidies, or regional basic income grants that are hard-coded into law to scale up or down automatically based on real-time labor market data.
So imagine a scenario. A major logistics hub in Ohio is completely automated by a new AI routing system. Thousands of dispatchers and supply chain managers are laid off in a single month. The local unemployment rate spikes from 4% to 9%?
Exactly. The moment that local unemployment rate hits a predefined trigger, say 8%, the automatic stabilizer kicks in. Federal funds instantly bypass Congress and flow directly to that specific zip code.
Wow.
Extended unemployment benefits activate immediately. Grants for local retraining programs unlock automatically. The safety net expands in real time to catch the falling workers without requiring a single politician to cast a vote.
That sounds incredibly efficient and humane. But we always come back to the fundamental math problem. Who pays for the sprinkler system? Right. The obvious populist answer seems to be tax the capital. Tax the massive tech monopolies that are making billions in profit from deploying the AI. Tax the server farms. But the macroeconomic research raises a massive red flag about doing exactly that, doesn't it?
It does, and this is perhaps the most vital economic reality we have to confront. The paper introduces the equity versus efficiency trade-off. This is the ultimate agonizing dilemma for any policymaker right now.
Walk us through the dilemma.
Policymakers naturally look at the staggering wealth inequality we discussed earlier, the fact that firm owners are getting massively richer while labor gets displaced. The instinct is to heavily tax AI capital and corporate profits to fund programs like universal basic income.
It seems fair.
It does seem fair. However, they extended their macroeconomic model to test this scenario. What happens if you slap a massive tax on AI adoption?
I assume it makes it too expensive for mid-sized companies to deploy the technology.
Precisely. It drastically slows down the rate at which firms adopt AI. And if firms don't deploy the AI, the broader economy loses out on the massive aggregate productivity growth that the technology promises.
Right.
They modeled a specific scenario where a heavy capital tax was implemented specifically to fund a universal basic income.
And what was the result?
It was a disaster. The heavy taxation strangled innovation so severely that overall economic output fell by 26.9%.
Wait, 26.9%?
Yes, the economy shrank by over a quarter.
Yeah.
And because the economy shrank so much, demand plummeted, meaning wages actually declined by 11.8%.
Okay, let me synthesize this because this is the absolute crux of the issue.
It really is.
The policymaker's dilemma is that to get the tax revenue necessary to pay for the massive social safety net to catch the displaced workers, you have to let the AI economy run hot. You have to let companies deploy it, disrupt industries, and make billions. But letting it run hot inherently creates massive, painful wealth inequality. If you try to stop the inequality by heavily taxing the tech to a crawl, you kill the golden goose. The total pie shrinks so much that everyone, including the displaced worker getting the UBI, actually ends up poorer in absolute terms.
You have articulated it perfectly. It is a terrifying tightrope. How does a government capture just enough of the productivity gains to support the vulnerable without disincentivizing the very technological innovation that creates the wealth in the first place?
It feels impossible.
If you tax too little, society fractures from inequality. If you tax too much, society stagnates and everyone gets poorer.
So if broad, sweeping macroeconomic taxation is that risky, what are the other options? Are there targeted interventions that don't involve rewiring the entire global tax code?
Yes. The policy roadmap suggests leaning heavily into regional and industry-level interventions. A prime example is the creation of federally funded tech hubs.
Okay, so instead of just taxing the wealth, you try to direct where the wealth is physically created.
Exactly. Right now, the vast majority of AI, capital, talent, and infrastructure is hyper-concentrated in massive coastal cities. Silicon Valley, Seattle, New York. If we leave it entirely to the free market, all the wealth generated by AI will stay locked in those hubs.
Right.
The tech hubs policy is a deliberate industrial strategy to force the geographic distribution of that wealth. Governments actively fund foundational AI research, grant massive tax breaks for data centers, and build localized workforce training pipelines, specifically in deindustrialized or economically depressed areas.
So going back to our earlier point about the precarious core, those clerical and administrative workers who are highly concentrated in the Midwest and Mountain West.
Right.
If AI is going to inevitably wipe out their clerical jobs, but it's also going to create massive new wealth, the government uses industrial policy to force that new AI wealth creation to happen in their backyards. You try to build the new AI infrastructure in the exact same zip codes where the old administrative jobs are dying.
Precisely. You match the regional economic intervention directly to the localized vulnerability. It doesn't solve the macro inequality, but it provides a geographic lifeline to the communities most at risk of being left behind.
Man, this has been an incredibly dense, profound journey today. We started by looking at the Great Decoupling, unraveling the counterintuitive paradox of how AI displacing high-paid white-collar workers might actually lower wage inequality, while simultaneously causing total wealth inequality to absolutely skyrocket for anyone who owns capital and equity.
We examine the crucial concept of adaptive capacity. We learn that your personal vulnerability to automation isn't just about what your job title is. It's deeply tied to your financial savings, your geography, and whether your role requires you to simply execute a capability or to hold institutional responsibility.
We looked at the profound psychological toll this is taking. The shattered assumptions of a professional class who did everything right, only to find the rules of the game changed overnight, leaving them without emotional scaffolding. We looked at the classroom, where the next generation is trapped in a prestige loop, outsourcing their critical thinking to the very machines they will soon be competing against.
And we zoomed out to the macroeconomic global stage, confronting the stark reality of digital feudalism. We saw how the massive capital requirements of AI threatened to lock the global south into a state of permanent economic extraction, paying digital dues to northern tech monopolies.
Finally, we explored the theoretical hope of post-work organizations where human purpose might shift toward the moral frontier of empathy and direction, balanced against the agonizing policy dilemma of trying to fund an automatic safety net without killing the economic engine that makes it possible.
It's a massive shift.
So if you were listening to this, why does all of this matter to you tomorrow morning? Because surviving the AI revolution is not just about taking a weekend coding boot camp or learning how to write a better prompt for a chatbot.
It is about fundamentally building your personal adaptive capacity.
It's about auditing your own career. Are you executing a routine capability that a machine can learn? Or are you holding complex ethical responsibility? It's about deliberately steering your trajectory toward that moral frontier of human skills, complex judgment, genuine empathy, and ethical leadership.
Exactly.
And most importantly, it's about understanding the deep macroeconomic currents that are reshaping the ground beneath your feet so you aren't caught off guard when the tectonic plates shift.
We are moving irrevocably from an era of doing to an era of directing. The question is whether you are positioned to direct or whether you are the task being optimized.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. Something that wasn't in the economic models, but is a logical extension of everything we've discussed. We've talked extensively today about how AI will displace human labor, how it will reorganize wealth, and how it might degrade our own cognitive problem solving if we rely on it too heavily. But flip the perspective for a second. Think about the machine itself.
The AI models.
Yes. Right now, these brilliant frontier AI models are trained on vast oceans of uniquely human-generated data. Our historical literature, our passionate forum debates, our flawed but brilliant code, our messy, emotional art. But as AI increasingly takes over these cognitive tasks, human creative output will become economically disincentivized.
People will stop making things.
Exactly. Fewer people will write original articles, fewer juniors will write original code. So inevitably, the next generation of AI models will have to begin training on data generated by other AI models. It's a synthetic feedback loop.
Model collapse.
Exactly, model collapse. If we structurally and economically devalue the messy, frictional human experience that generates original thought, will the intelligence we are building eventually plateau in a sterile, recursive echo chamber of its own making? If society decides it no longer needs to pay humans to think, does the machine ultimately run out of original human brilliance to learn from?
It is the ultimate paradox. Can artificial intelligence truly thrive if it successfully, economically eradicates the human ingenuity that feeds it?
Something to think about the next time you ask a chatbot to summarize an article for you. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.